Here we go. Good morning. It is November 17th. It is Thursday. We're going to have a brief news session this morning. I don't have a whole lot of time, so we're not going to do any of the Red Pill Fitness Q&A kind of questions. We're just going to go over some of the news headlines because there's a lot of interesting stuff happening this morning. Let's jump over to Twitter. Look at this. I'm not wasting any time today. We got stuff to talk about. A lot of stuff to talk about. Big things. Huge things happening. First and foremost, let's pop the top on our morning caffeine here. Ooh, boy. That first sip always gets me good. Okay, so Hunter Biden is trending this morning on Twitter. Why might Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, be trending on Twitter, Josh? Well, if you have been in a coma for the last 2 years, Joe Biden won the presidential election in 2020, in large part thanks to the fact that highly incriminating video footage, email exchanges, and many other materials were on his son, Hunter Biden's laptop. That laptop was turned over to the FBI before the 2020 elections with video evidence of him hanging out with prostitutes and snorting cocaine, and in his emails, his business emails, talking about his Burisma agreements, working over in Ukraine on behalf of the United States, using his dad's reputation to make millions of dollars. All of these things, basically showing that he is very clearly a compromised individual, and not just Hunter, but the entire Biden family is compromised in terms of foreign honeypot scenarios with a certain government, Ukraine. So that all happened right before the 2020 election. The entire mainstream news institution came together to suppress that news. We actually know now that the government worked directly with social media, Facebook and Twitter, to suppress that news. It wasn't like an editorial decision on the part of the social media companies. It was the government telling them, hey, we're hearing a lot about this allegedly Russian hoax laptop thing, so make sure you suppress the story. This isn't Josh coming up with all this stuff. This is an interview. Mark Zuckerberg, you may have heard of him. He's the guy who created Facebook. Sat down with Joe Rogan and explained all of this very clearly on camera, that the government came to him, told him they said that these stories about this laptop sound like a Russian hoax to them. So we need you to flag it all as misinformation so the people never find out about it. Seriously, that happened. That's your government working to interfere with a political election. There's no other way to describe that. It's not even that complicated. When you say it so plainly that way, how can you actually say that the 2020 election didn't have interference from our own government via social media? Big tech censorship, big tech misinformation. So we're going to get into misinformation a little bit more with one of the other stories I want to go over today. But we've been sitting here for the last 2 years all knowing that the 2020 election was fraudulent. That's why January 6th happened, because the American people knew the election was fraudulent and they were pissed about it. That's why the Capitol got stormed. It was an election integrity protest. Could have prevented that from ever happening in the first place if you just held an honest election, but you wanted to steal the thing from Donald Trump because he's not politically correct and he hurts people's feelings when he talks. Now, that's why cheap liberals wanted Trump out of office. The establishment wanted Trump out of office because he has called out and recognized the Jewish threat in America, and that it is not a America First ideology. It's an Israel First ideology, which fundamentally is not congruent with what the average American wants. We don't need the 2% ethnic minority of this country running our government and our news and our entertainment industry and our banking industry. We don't need that. That's not the best representation of what the people want. So finally now, 2 years later, that the Republicans have gained control of the House thanks to the midterms, narrowly so, due to the substantial election fraud happening in places like Pennsylvania and Arizona. Both states Republicans clearly should have won. We'll get into that story as well. Despite the rampant cheating, just due to the sheer volume of bad decisions the Biden administration has made, the Republicans still managed to squeak out the majority in the House, which has now enabled them to create this commission for an investigation on the Biden family's ties to China. And there's the quote there: "This committee will evaluate whether the president is compromised or swayed by foreign dollars. This is an investigation of Joe Biden." So don't be confused. The evidence is on Hunter Biden's laptop, but 10% to the big guy. Do you know what that means? It means all those business dealings in Ukraine that his son was out there doing for him on his behalf, on the American people's behalf. Old Joe, Grandpa Joe, 10% for the big guy. And that's kind of a problem when foreign governments are giving you millions of dollars to cooperate with their oil industry and all these other. It's just so, it stinks. Okay, it stinks. So that's big news. Now, don't get overly excited. You know, I announce it as big news, and obviously it's a step in the right direction towards exposing this corrupt regime that's been in charge for the last 2 years. And there are some people saying that this is the smoking gun, and that what's really going to result of this is basically immediate impeachment, removal of Biden, and implementation of Trump for 2 more years, and then Trump will win again in 2024. And so they're basically thinking this is the beginning of potentially a 6-year Trump run all of a sudden. I think that's probably overly ambitious thinking. I mean, the glacial nature at which these committees work, at which everything in our government works, I think it'll take a full 2 more years of investigating this, and they'll do so intentionally so that Biden never necessarily has to have the embarrassment of impeachment, because it looks very bad for America, by the way. It's a public acknowledgement of, yeah, our elections are crap. You know, they get interfered with by social media. They get interfered with by our own government. If we genuinely come out and say, yep, 2020 was fraudulent, great news, put Trump back in, but the national stage or the international stage then is looking at us as a country who can't even conduct its own elections fairly. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. Not at the federal presidential race level, or at the gubernatorial race level, or our Senate seats, or our House seats. All of them are subject to dramatic election interference. Whether that's the big tech collusion, whether that's the abuse of mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting, they're just, everything about them is fucked at this point. The public have virtually no faith in these elections anymore. So if the American government actually wants to get the people back, which it's not clear they do, there's going to need to be a lot of mea culpas and a lot of accountability over the next couple years. Do I think it would be best to impeach Biden, replace him with Trump, and, you know, go through that public embarrassment as a country? Yes, I do. Because 2 wrongs don't make a right. It's as simple as that. And if you drag this out over the course of 2 years and then shame Biden, who at that point is 80-something years old, is going to die in a couple years anyway, and frankly, his legacy is already negative. Like, even people who aren't necessarily Republican, who are just kind of getting by as liberals, and the only reason they continue to vote blue in the midterms is because they don't want to encourage a Trump resurgence. So they continue to vote for Biden or just whatever Democrat is on the ballot. Those individuals, those Democrats, I think they'll need to be placated up until. Oh my goodness, hey, Harley, I didn't even know you're on here. I got distracted with my rant about the breaking news this morning with the Hunter Biden and Joe Biden investigation. The date in my video is yesterday's date. Oh yeah, you're right. Let's fix that. 17. I fixed the rerun thing though. I had to dig into my settings and look. Here's some advice for Twitch. If you guys, corporate Twitch is listening, here you go. There's a checkbox in there that says flag my episode as reruns so that my watchers don't get confused, which makes them angry because they thought a live episode was a rerun or vice versa. So I checked that box because it's like, yeah, I don't want to annoy my users who think they're watching something live, but it's actually a rerun. I thought that was in reference to the video on demand stuff. I thought it was saying flag your previous streams as reruns so people don't confuse them for live. Turns out it was a setting that just means every time I go live, flag it as a rerun. It's like, what the hell kind of feature is that? I guess it's for if you've pre-recorded your session and you're just basically streaming your desktop live, a pre-recorded session, but streaming live, then I guess you can flag it as a rerun like that. I don't find that highly useful. I've been doing these shows live rather than pre-recorded. That's kind of the whole point. My productivity was held back when I was trying to pre-record everything and run it through an editing suite, all that stuff. But thanks for the heads up, Harley. Got that fixed. It says 11:17 now. So anyway, we'll see what happens with this investigation. I doubt, honestly, that they'll be able to do it swiftly enough to where we actually get Biden impeached. And even if he was impeached, I doubt that we would get a majority in order to actually execute the impeachment and reinstate Trump. I don't see all that stuff happening. But it's still important to at least expose the fact that, yes, there really is evidence out there of this corruption, and the entire world needs to know it. All of the news organizations need to be reporting about it, not just Fox News. So that's the Hunter Biden stuff, okay? This is another one I saw this morning from Zuby. Nice softball question, but just curious. What was the silliest, least scientific pandemic policy? You know, mostly the House of Cards has fallen down now. I still see some people trying to push for wintertime is coming. Make sure you get your 9th COVID shot and wear 6 face masks when you go to the grocery store. And obviously being in the Portland area, the hypersensitive hypochondriac culture, I do see a lot of people in mass up here still. It's sad. I mean, these people actually have like brain damage at this point. They really think that's necessary. Especially when you go to places like Whole Foods or any of the bougier, nicer places. Still got the face mask. So, I mean, honestly, that might be the policy that was the silliest. You have to wear a face mask everywhere you go. How about face masks in a gym? That's pretty silly, if you ask me. Pretty silly. I think the stickers on the floor at Walmart that show you which direction of the aisle you're supposed to go down, one-way aisles in the grocery store, I think that was probably one of the dumbest policies that I've seen. What is this link from the NIH, Harley? Let's pull it up. Let's see. Where did that... Oh, man, I think it opened it in an Edge browser. Really? I need to, like, uninstall Edge browser. Like, listen, Microsoft, I never want to use your browser. Ever. COVID update. What is the truth? And this is from the NIH. Back in April. Let's see. Is there a too long didn't read here, Harley? Update us. Red pill us on the summary of all this. If I were to guess, I'm going to say We overreacted out of caution. We tried to do the best thing for as many people as possible. And by best thing, I mean guilt tripping and shaming everybody who disagreed with us. That's, I'm guessing, what that entire thing says. But yeah, you had stickers on the floor of Walmart telling you which direction you could walk down the milk aisle so that we could make sure COVID didn't spread. That was probably useless, I'm going to say. I'm not sure how many lives we saved thanks to those stickers. On the subject of election fraud, not to stray too far from what really matters, don't misinterpret this article by Becker News as relevant to the midterms, because it is misleading. This is what journalists do, by the way. They grab you with a clickbait headline that seems like it's related to something that just happened, just kind of contextually, like, okay, midterms just happened. You're talking about ballot fraud. You're probably talking about midterms. Well, this article is actually in reference to a 2019 race. And long story short, though, it was found out that this Democrat candidate had 1,000+ ballots with forged signatures and now has been arrested for ballot fraud. Shocking story. In what state? Pennsylvania. Why is Pennsylvania, in the news, and why do people care about Pennsylvania suddenly? Because they just elected a brain-dead troll for state senate in Joe Fetterman. And there's just no possible way that really happened. There's no way that voting citizens would prefer to have somebody who can't have a conversation versus Dr. Oz. And listen, I'm not sitting here hyping up Dr. Oz. I'm just saying that at least he could respond to questions when you asked him, what is your perspective on inflation? How do you feel about abortion? Whether or not you agree with his stances, he could at least answer you in coherent statements. Yeah, there you go, Harley. COVID was hyped too big and everything was unscientific. Yeah, I saw they also came out and said the whole 6-foot thing was not based in science. It was just them trying to do something because they didn't know what else to do. And this is what I mean. It's just like the emotional knee-jerk reaction is establish control. That's what we saw. It was not pause, collect data, don't overreact, think rationally, don't throw money at the problem. That would be how a society should respond. But when you have an industry like Big Pharma who capitalizes on every single minor ailment, you can tell them, hey, I blew my nose today. What do you think that means? Well, that probably means you need a prescription for the rest of your life for $20 a month. Okay, well, what about my back pain? Do I need to go to like a physical therapist and try to work on that? No, what you need are some pills. I didn't even pull up the article. I scrolled right past it, but one of the first headlines I saw this morning, I didn't think I wanted to make a story out of it, but now I kind of hit the topic anyway with Big Pharma and the overprescription of pharmaceuticals. The headline was that 70+ million Americans are on some kind of pharmaceutical drug. There's only 330 million Americans in the country. Okay, so do the math. What is that? 20% of all Americans are on drugs? Do you think that's a great baseline for your society to have 1 out of 5 people on drugs? See if I can find the headline because it was very interesting. Nah, I think we lost it. Don't you guys hate that when you want to go back to something you saw on your news feed, but it's already refreshed? Oh, wait. I think we'll be able to find it. I saw this Brazilian deaf mute trans woman sings Whitney Houston. Like, I don't want to feel bad, okay? I don't want to listen to that and then laugh at this person who's deaf. Why did you put that in front of me? Just like trying to guilt trip me. We'll talk about the misinformation in regards to the Poland missile scam, Ukraine. shooting a missile, having it land in Poland, trying to point to Russia, say it was them, trying to bring America and NATO into what would be World War III. I called that out, by the way. I don't know if you guys caught that. The day that happened on my stream, when it was breaking news, I said, this is a false flag. Had false flag written all over it. Which it turned out to be. Okay, here we go. Check this out. Poso. Took me a while to find it. Total number of people taking psychiatric drugs in the United States. 77 million people. So as I said, that's like more than 1 out of 5, something like that. Somebody else do the math. I don't really care that much, but my back of the napkin math says 1 out of 5. Which that's just terrible. That's a disgrace for a first world country to acknowledge that 1 out of 5 people are on psychiatric drugs. That means our form of government, the type of entertainment we ingest, the type of news we ingest, it's all just become so toxic and poisonous that we're trying to medicate ourselves out of it rather than going the right direction of trying to pray our way out of it. Prayer takes longer. Prayer takes faith in something that you can't just hold in your hand. And that's why people skip it. And that's why they just say, you know what, if I can just go to a doctor to fix my problems rather than look inward, pray, look to God, if I can just go to a doctor and he can give me a pill that'll make me stop being depressed, he can give me a pill that'll help me lose weight. That's how you end up with 1 out of 5 people in your country on drugs. Because people think science is the answer to everything. Didn't I rant about this yesterday? The idolatry of science? That's how the COVID Nazism got to where it was because you had government leaders, Fauci, for example, saying that there's no questioning science, period. If you're a science skeptic, if you have evidence that says something contrary to the science that they have, then you're a criminal and you should be punished and you shouldn't be allowed to speak in public. And, I can go on the COVID rant for the 1 millionth time if I want to. What's up, Banda? Good to see you again here. Pick up my bicycle from the store. Oh my goodness, man. That's a rough day. Flat tire. I know the feeling, man. I had to take my car in yesterday. Talked about that on the show. And drop some money on making sure everything is functioning so that I can drive 2,500 miles here in 29 days across my country, relocate to the great state of Alabama. Rainy all day, too. We have that here in the Portland area. From about November all the way through April, it rains about 6 days a week. Pretty dreadful. It's one of the many reasons I'm leaving here. So we talked this morning so far about the election interference at the state level, in Pennsylvania. I got a headline, I do believe, pulled up also for election interference at the state level in Arizona. Let me see if I can flip over to that one. Did I flag that? Maybe I didn't. It was some footage. Here it is. So, Kari Lake just lost in Arizona, the race for governor. And, Blake Masters obviously lost as well. And these were extremely popular people, extremely well-spoken. Their policies were just beautifully articulated, very easy to understand. You had them calling out the news media. I mean, that race was in the bag. And yet they lost. Kind of like when you run against, a lobotomy patient, you expect to win, and it's pretty shocking when it doesn't happen. So, obviously, we look into the election fraud and the different ways they can cheat with these mail-in ballots, and ballot box stuffing here was caught on tape. If you guys would like to see, you've got some early ballots coming in. So many ballots from one car. Who has this many ballots, by the way? I mean, when you go and cast your absentee ballot, are you like having so many that they're falling out of your hands and you can barely stuff them into the ballot box? Or is it more like your ballot and maybe your disabled grandmother who couldn't leave the house? How's that? 3. Just stuff them in there. As many as you got. Totally normal. Nothing to see here. And you can see the dates along the bottom. You're ramping up to November 8th, which is when the election was. And look at that. You got to take my pictures. That way I can let the mules know where I dropped them off. That way I can get paid. That's how this works if you didn't know. Oh, man, you missed your dentist appointment, Banda? Yeah, you got to rebook that, man. Keep those teeth healthy. So, here's some evidence of the election fraud going on in Arizona. We talked about how arrests are now being made, not necessarily for the current midterm because they haven't had time to review that one. This is how slow, I mentioned earlier, that the government works. They're just now reviewing 2019 elections and campaigns for illegal election interference and making arrests for those. So, who knows how long it's going to take to get verification of all of this fraud from the 2022 midterms. It'll probably be close to the 2024 presidential election when we actually know how many seats were stolen in this midterms. It's pretty bad. It's shameful. But what are you supposed to do? You got to fix it. If you find out your child lied to you, you don't just say, well, I know the truth now, and then just move on. No, you go and reprimand your child and you explain to them that you're going to be punished for this. You're going to be held accountable. And the expectation is that this never happens again, because if it happens again, the punishment is going to be twice as severe. I mean, the punishment should be death. You interfere with, we're supposed to have this universal agreement that democracy is the one thing we are all supposed to require in this nation, no matter what political affiliation you have, conservative, progressive, whatever. All of us are supposed to agree that democracy is the way we do things. So when you catch somebody interfering with your democracy, with the laws that affect all of us, the punishment should be severe and it should be swift. It shouldn't be 3 years later, hey, I think you interfered in that election. Here's your fine of $250,000 to somebody who's worth $100 million. Do you really think they give a fuck? All right. Anyway, that's election fraud. Pretty disappointing, pretty annoying. It always is. A couple of things I don't want everybody to just look over because the mainstream news is not covering them because they don't fit the narrative. If you'll remember, Darrell Brooks. Of course you don't remember Darrell Brooks because he's one of those people who killed several innocent civilians who were just minding their own business. But he didn't receive as much media attention from CNN, NPR, ABC, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post. All these guys, they didn't really want to talk about him, and that's purely down to his skin color. He decided to get into his SUV, drive into a Christmas parade, and killed several people. And so when the mainstream was forced to cover the story because it was such a large and tragic story, the way their headlines were titled said, SUV runs into parade, kills, I don't know how many it was, kills 3, kills 6, whatever. SUV went and killed people. Not some individual named Darrell Brooks with a mugshot of him. Not black man. None of that. Not former criminal. None of that. Just SUV. Because you know how SUVs do. SUVs really have a thing for people who love Christmas. They just want to go around and road rage murder them. SUVs have been known to do that. So that's how the mainstream news covered Darrell Brooks. It didn't fit the whole young white shooter that they love to hype everybody up about. So anyway, fast forward several years later, and he's actually been finally handed his punishment for such a crime, which appears to be 6 consecutive life sentences and 700 additional years. I mean, that's all for show. Obviously, you get 1 life sentence. That's all that really matters. So he'll be spending his life in jail. I don't understand why he doesn't get the death penalty, by the way. What happened to the death penalty? When did we stop doing that? Eye for an eye, you kill people, we kill you. Maybe that would discourage people from acting like this. But accountability is important, so there you guys go. That's the status of that story that's been playing out for a couple years now. That's the most recent. Let's knock out this one because this is pretty straightforward. It's just sad, but I'll read it for you. This is a post from Reddit, which, by the way, I avoid like the plague. It's kind of like the normie version of 4chan, the snowflake version of 4chan. I'm so bitter is the name of the post, and it says, the trans community says that if you detransition and regret what you did to yourself, you have no one to blame but you. But I was 10. I was 10 years old, obese, and already looked more like a boy than a girl. I despised myself. The internet told me this was the way out, gave me tips on hiding from my parents who wanted nothing but for me to not make a huge mistake. I'm 17 now, my breasts are completely stunted, I have a severe eating disorder, and I've never had a boyfriend. I ruined myself at 10 years old, and the community that once encouraged me now turns their back and ridicules me. I'm so bitter. So, yeah, that's tragic, that's depressing. That's a 10-year-old who, in the name of trans activism, in the name of gender ideology, in the name of liberalism, now has to live the rest of her life with a scarred, mutilated body, has to somehow recover from this eating disorder they now have, has to live with the shame of being shunned and ostracized from the community that once embraced them. That's your circle of people. If you want to say that those are your people, the ones who will hype you up and gaslight you when you're saying, yeah, maybe I do think I'm one of you, but immediately turn their back when you say, hey, this is giving me like depression and it's making my life very sad and difficult, then they are not your friends anymore. Hey, that's your bad decisions that you made. We had nothing to do with that, okay? We definitely did not groom you into these awful decisions. And so this is why it is not a live and let live situation. This trans stuff, I know there are people who are just swelling with compassion who think that, look, Josh, you just gotta, look, if they're not hurting anybody, let them do their thing. You know, if a guy wants to dress as a girl and pretend to be a girl, what does that have to do with you? If he's not hurting anybody, they are hurting people. Did you not hear the story I just read? They are hurting people. It's not just the way they look when they go to the grocery store. It's how they also preach their belief to impressionable young people. Whether that's on the internet, whether that's during drag queen story hour, doesn't matter. There was never a problem with all this drag queen crap back when all of these shows were relegated to the gay strip clubs where they were born. That's where drag queens hour and all this other stuff started. Conservatives never liked it, obviously, but so long as they kept to their own little hole, then it was fine. But when you started trying to normalize it and bring it into the public arena, into libraries, into our children's schools, into our children's books, onto our children's television shows, we got a problem. Vanda, oh man, you're too funny. You're on one this morning. You are on one. You're not wrong, by the way. A lot of people will say you can't say that about black people, that they have disproportionate representation in terms of the crime that we see in society. Yes, I can. The FBI says so. Is the FBI also racist when they say that 50% of violent crime is conducted by black people? Do you think the FBI is racist now? Or are you just mad at me for stating the obvious? It's not racist, it's just facts. In the same way that it's not bigotry to say that this poor young 10-year-old child was abused by trans ideologues. That's not bigotry, that's facts. So, I never enjoy reading these stories of detransitioners. They're always just horribly sad. But it's important that people understand the implications of the whole live and let live. It's not hurting anybody. That's just not true. You got to grow out of that mindset if you still have that mindset. Okay, here we go. This was a good one. Good old Libs of TikTok. Great Instagram account / Twitter account. They've really held the flag for exposing a lot of the liberal lunacy that is plaguing America. Let me check here. So this morning, they posted early this morning. Actually, I guess it was last night. The application for transgender San Francisco residents to receive guaranteed income has 97 gender options. Kids get groomed at church too. Yeah, Bandit. I mean, look, it would be hypocritical to say that there hasn't historically been a problem with pedophilia in the church. Like, that's just true too. And this is coming from somebody who has a daily, deep relationship with Jesus Christ, is a very devout Christian. But it is true that in the powerful echelons of the church, there is a recorded history of child abuse, child sexual abuse. It's very dark. It's another thing people don't want to talk about. But it is what it is. Like, what can you say? You have to find the bad apples and root them out and make punishment so severe and so public that all of society gets the message that I don't want to have that happen to me. Does not matter how sexually attracted to whoever I am. I'm just not going to do that because I don't want my head chopped off in the public square. How about that? How about if the punishment for pedophilia and grooming was decapitation in front of the local Target? If you want to elect me as your politician to sort these problems out, I'm happy to do so. Seriously, I bet the number of child sexual abuse cases we have in this country goes down very, very quickly when we say, if you're caught molesting a child, you get decapitated, and we're going to make it a public event. We're going to do it in the Target parking lot. All the Karens get to watch. We're going to put it on a live stream for the entire nation to watch. We're going to take your name and run it along the bottom of the screen and say, this is what happens when you take advantage of our nation's children. Does anybody have any questions? Vote for Josh. That's what I would do in order to fix this grooming pedophilia epidemic that we have in our country. So on the note of gender ideology, San Francisco is doing this ridiculous handout where they prioritize people who are gender non-conforming, whatever. Basically, if you're not straight, then you get free government handouts. Great, right? Great. That's awesome. We should definitely put bias against straight people because somehow they're worse or more cruel or less deserving than people who are gender non-conforming. That makes total sense. So they've gone ahead and done that, but the application for you to apply and say that, hey, I'm gender nonconforming and I want some free money, apparently you have to choose one of 97 genders on the application in order to get your free money. Now, in case you were wondering, wow, 97, that's a lot. Matt Walsh had a call out, and look, I tore apart Matt Walsh last night. He's still on my Twitter feed because, like I said, you got to keep your eyes open. You got to know every rank in the Army, what they're doing, who they're working for, how they're keeping themselves busy. And so how Matt Walsh is keeping himself busy is kind of staying in his swim lane of the whole gender topic. Obviously, he did the documentary, What is a Woman? So that's all good and well. But anyway, he had a very relevant call out with this San Francisco handout. One of the genders on the application, you're trying to choose, or I should say sexual orientations, I'm sorry. You can choose bisexual, you can choose asexual, you can choose gay. Then faggot is on here. Now, I'm confused. I thought faggot was equivalent to the N-word at this point in time. That it was a hate crime to use the word faggot. That's what I thought. But apparently, if you are a gender non-conforming socialist who wants free government money, if you call yourself a faggot, that's how you get free money from your state, from your city. Pretty odd twist on things, honestly. Like, can black people go and call themselves the N-word and collect some free money, for that matter? Is that how this works? If I start calling myself, like, a white supremacist, can I get some free money? I don't really understand what's going on here. Maybe we're going to normalize the F word again? I don't know. But it's a good call out from Matt. Appreciate that. Talked about the Pennsylvania fraud. All right. I think that's probably going to do it for this morning. Like I said, I just wanted to get in a quick episode. We mentioned the misinformation along the Poland missile stuff, so we already hit on that. I was going to explain more in regards to how that was clearly misinformation that the mainstream media just 24 hours ago was saying we needed to go to World War III for. And are you going to see anybody held accountable for putting forth that misinformation? Are you going to see CNN or ABC or the various journalists on Twitter get their posts flagged as misinformation, get their accounts banned because they said, oh, Russia missile might set off World War III? No, that was never a Russian missile in the first place. No, you're not going to see any of that. It's only misinformation or disinformation when it's against the liberal agenda. It can be completely non-factual, it can be 100% false, wrong information, and still not be flagged as misinformation so long as it goes in support of the Democrats or the or the big tech agenda. That hypocrisy just is the state of things right now. But on that note, let's wrap it up. I'll probably be back this afternoon, probably for about a 5 p.m.-ish, maybe 5:30 Pacific Daylight Savings Time. It's in about 8 hours, for those of you who don't know. I got my normal 9-to-5 job to do. I got to get to my real work. Fun hanging out with you guys this morning. Lots of interesting headlines, big things happening with the Hunter Biden investigation. Really, we need to call it the Joe Biden investigation because that's what it really is. 10% for the big guy. Let's get him his 10%. Let's make sure he gets it. I'd like to see him spend 100% of his life in jail. That's what I would like to see. So we'll see how it plays out. Stay tuned.